Hey everyone, today we're doing just a fun video where we rank all of the killers based on how visually scary they look, or just like the best design for the purpose of horror, I guess. I'll be touching on the lore a bit, but it's mainly being ranked on visuals and sounds and such. Okay, so in last place we have Crazy K-pop Man. Although I personally like the visual design of Trickster, I wouldn't say he looks scary really. I wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley. At the same time, out of all of the killers, his visual appearance is, well, insanely bright. From his neon bat to his yellow and pink attire, he's not scary looking. At the same time, at the broader standard of DBD, he isn't really. Next up we have Plague. Again, another situation where I really like her appearance and think it's a pretty cool design. She doesn't exactly look scary beyond the horrible crawling plague that covers half of her body. Other than that, she is dressed like a Babylonian priestess, and yeah, I just don't think it's that scary beyond the plague that covers half her body. Cool overall design though, just not really scary, I wouldn't say. Next we have Twins. The one thing that makes Twins scary is just the massive gash in Charlotte's chest where Victor sits. It's just a disturbing image, to be honest, a smaller human resting in the large wound of another. Other than that, these two are some of the most normal looking humans visually. Charlotte's weapon is kinda grisly and scary, but broadly lore-wise too, they aren't even so concerned with killing as much as they are surviving, so they're gonna be quite low down on this one. In 21 we have Wraith. Wraith has this creepy phantom look to him. The thing that makes Wraith look kinda scary though are honestly his eyes, which are just these single points of white that make him seem inhuman and supernatural. There's also his weapon, which is crafted from a human spine and skull, which, you know, is pretty unsettling. And then there's also his bell, which honestly adds a whole atmosphere to him, where he could appear out of anywhere, but his bell is always what you're gonna hear first. Next up we have Pig. The main thing that makes Pig scary is just the fact that she's wearing the severed head of a pig, and how seamlessly it connects to the rest of her body. It's just really gross, to be honest, and you get this grotesque image of a pig head on a human body. Her other clothing isn't particularly imposing, nor has she got a scary physicality to her, but it's just the pig head, honestly. Okay, now we have Legion. Legion is pretty scary as they're some of the most grounded in reality characters that give off this very creepy feeling. They have a basic look with a standard set of masks and some blood smeared over them, as well as having combat knives which they play around with. Physically they aren't too imposing, but I think what makes them scary is the fact that they look so human still, and well, they are very human still in the lore, but they just have this uncontrollable rage behind them that pushes them to be on the level of some of the other killers on here. Deathslinger has a look that still makes him seem like there is humanity in him. The main thing that makes him scary is his spear rifle, which is incredibly grisly looking and just generally makes him seem a bit sadistic, especially when you read through the lore and read about how his rifle pierced into people's guts and pulled them out. It's pretty grim stuff. Other than that, he has a kinda messed up jaw, but really he doesn't look overly scary. The main thing that makes Hillbilly scary is similar to Bubba, in that he doesn't even really want to kill, but he does it out of the assumption that he will be heard by whoever he encounters. Along with this, he's tall and imposing, and primarily it's his chainsaw and cattle hammer that make him kinda terrifying. If I ever see a guy holding those two things coming at me, you can be sure I'm running the other way. Bubba isn't really scary outright, as his lore is down to him being scared. However, this regret from what he's doing out of fear is still pretty scary because it shows the extent he'll go to defend himself. And there's his chainsaw and mask made of human skin, which is, hey, pretty creepy and menacing. There's also the fact that he's a pretty built guy who can take a person down with a single blow of his cattle hammer, a lot like Billy. The skin mask makes him a little higher than Billy though, I think. Okay, next up we have Ghostface. Ghosty is only really scary because he has a similar thing to Myers, and that's the blank slate face which reveals nothing, despite there being an incredibly messed up person behind the mask. His knife gives you a good idea of the kind of guy he is, and the way he jumps around excitedly and takes pictures with his victims makes you realize how messed up he is. So, despite the fact that generally he resembles a normal person, behind the blank mask is someone who you don't want to mess with. Okay, now on to Hag. Much of Hag's horror comes from her backstory, almost justifying her appearance, making it all the more unnerving. Aside this, there's many things to fear when it comes to Hag, from her huge clawed hand, her hunched and twisted posture, with her sharp teeth, and overall her look is just creepy with her flayed skin and bones poking out from what remains. Also the oddness to her that comes with her hexes and magic. Next up we have Clown. Clown's appearance, although pretty normal looking in terms of his physicality and such, still resembling that of a human, is incredibly unnerving. He also has so many gross sounds and creepy features to him, like fingers hanging around his waist. He's more disgusting than anything, but still this makes him scary in a more psychological way, as he's just very unpleasant to look at. Okay, next up we have Nurse. Nurse's supernatural element and strangely creepy way of floating around with her slumped posture and weak looking body, but insanely powerful ability to blink around, and also her telekinetic ability, makes her kinda scary. She also has her screams when she blinks, and her breathing which is raspy and sounds trapped in her throat. The bag over her head and just her role as a nurse is generally just very disturbing. If considering Freddy's backstory more over his appearance, he would be higher in this list, but if we're looking mainly at his visuals, he just simply isn't as imposing as some of the others here. With that said, he certainly is still a creepy looking dude, with his low and sadistic laugh, his messed up skin, and homemade clawed glove, which lets you know he's kinda into what he does, as he's made his very own weapon. Doctor is higher than he would have been recently due to his new and updated appearance, where his face looks insanely creepy. Doctor's laugh is also a big part of him being scary, the sadistic cackle he does, and the enjoyment of what he's doing. Also, his electrified bat is pretty terrifying too, and similar to Spirit, also he has these janky movements due to the electric current moving through him. Blight doesn't seem immediately like he would be very scary, but honestly, reading into his lore and just looking the guy over, he is messed up. From his jaw that has practically dropped off of his face and being overwhelmed by the blight, he looks pretty terrifying, honestly. The least scary part of him I would argue to be the cane as his weapon, but aside that, he looks inhuman, insane, and pretty horrifying overall. His scariest look probably being his full blight look, where the humanity becomes unrecognizable. Huntress is up here due to her creepy humming, her dark and soulless eyes behind the mask of an animal, and the huge axe that she wields. Her physical stature is also very imposing, and I guess just how capable she is with both of her weapons, as we learn the lore about her taking down squadrons of soldiers. The fact she has the mind of a child is also quite unnerving, as it suggests very little space to reason with her. Next up we have Spirit. A large part of Spirit's creepiness is her supernatural element, where she can blink in and out of the world and she could suddenly appear behind you. It's pretty scary, to be honest. She also has her divided and severed limbs which float about ominously. She has these creepy janky movements and very unsettling facial expressions, where she briefly smiles and then goes sad. Very unsettling. She also has a katana that she can whip out of her arm at any time, which, let's be honest, isn't normal. Trapper, although having a very simple design, has a very unnerving presence to him, and one that is created through a combination of different things that we've mentioned previously for other characters. First off, he has his mask, which with the new visual update is pretty terrifying, showing all of the details to his mask made of bone. He then has a very large stature and hooks puncturing his skin, with the constant low growl of his voice, breathing heavily. Everything about him is a bit shoddily made and put together, which makes him seem all the more scary, as you know how calculated and effective he is regardless. Myers is probably the killer who does the blank slate look the best. He has an incredibly simple getup of a boiler suit and a blank white mask with soulless dark eyes behind it. As his name suggests, he's just a shape in the distance, staring and watching, holding the unsettling weapon of his fairly common kitchen knife, showing how little he cares for the method of how he does things, but simply just wanting to do them. Yep, he's super creepy basically, and generally his image in horror as a whole is pretty iconic. Next up we have Demogorgon. Demo gets this spot just mainly due to its otherworldly presence. It's humanoid, but it clearly isn't human, with its longer limbs and mouth filled with 1,000 needle-like teeth and long sharp claws. Again, I think it's just the almost alien-like visuals of Demo that make it pretty terrifying. I remember watching the first season of the show, when it was actually kinda scary, with the first encounter with the Demogorgon being pretty creepy as this distorted humanoid shape standing in the road. Oni is this huge hulk of a man with a katana, kanabo, and huge suit of armor. This guy is scary just for his physicality and hulking stature, and the map-wide scream he lets out when he enters his power. Further with his power, when his whole body gets covered in this red fire-like substance that flows through him, he's also a relentless fighter in the lore and just generally pretty damn terrifying. There's not much to explain, Oni is pretty self-explanatory. Nemesis, much like Oni, is purely scary from his hulking physicality that is just imposing regardless of his visuals. I would argue Nemesis is a bit scarier than Oni, also just for his almost Frankenstein-like appearance and the whole idea of him being a science experiment gone too far. There's also literal tentacles that can just whip out of his arm and quickly grab and wrap around you. The way this guy only needs one kick to break a generator, goes around punching the survivors, and is generally just a walking tank is pretty damn terrifying. So this means that our number one is Pyramid Head, who I think is the perfect combination of creepy looking but also physically physically imposing. His entire design is very unnerving, from the hulking pyramid that he has for a head to the oversized knife that he drags around the ground, creating this horrible screeching sound, so you always know he's slowly coming. I think Pyramid Head is better than the straight up bigger characters, as he has an atmosphere that he drags around with him, and it's not just about him being big and scary, it's his whole image which is creepy and unnerving, and he just sets a certain tone when you just look at the guy. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. Do let me know your own personal rankings for this list also. Thanks, and goodbye.